when I think about that particular combination, the loving from wounds is maybe that people pleaser state that I was once in, where I felt like, yes, I am hurt, but because I'm hurt, I can do something different to make sure that, other people don't feel that way. But that also puts me back into a state of self abandonment. But when you start operating from nine energy and you're loving from wisdom is saying, okay, I can still love this person, this circumstance, this environment, and also be cautious and aware of what it is that I already know and choose not to stay stuck in those cycles. Six is what makes you cling, and nine forces you to surrender. It's almost like six comes from a vibration of fear. And if you're not truly careful and mindful, you will mistake that for the actual assignment. You will mistake the trauma for the assignment. Six shows you what hurts, and nine shows you what it is that you need to heal. Hey y'all, hey, welcome back to Truth, Trust, and Trajectory with your girl Shakim B. And if you guys are new here to this space, this is where spirituality meets healing, where psychology meets intuition, and where we stop lying to ourselves about who we are and what it is that we are called to do. Today's episode is a deep one. And I say that every single episode because I feel like I'm always pulling from these deep internal spaces, right? So it's one of the most important spiritual transitions that you'll ever go through. The transformation from six energy to nine energy. This is where the shift happens when your soul is done with the lesson and ready for evolution. And I'm not just teaching this from a book, I'm teaching this from lived experience, from having a spiritual awakening, from numerology, from astrology, and from my own birth chart. So I was born on March 9th, 1988 at 11:34 a.m. in Rochester, New York. And because of this, my shift has been hitting me heavy too. So if you have been outgrowing old relationships, walking away from people that you once loved deeply, feeling spiritually pulled towards something bigger, or even just seeing the numbers 6, 9, 69, or 96 everywhere, and this episode is for you. So, I want to get into the six energy, right? We want to talk about the number six. Most people think that number six is just a number, but in numerology, six carries an entire vibration. Six is the energy of responsibility, it is the energy of love, family, emotional duty, caretaking, sacrifice, harmony, deep soul contracts, okay? But there's also a shadow side. Every number has a light and a dark. The shadow of six is self abandonment, overgiving, loving people who hurt you, tolerating emotional crumbs, staying too long, fixing people who do not want to heal, and confusing attachment with love. This is why people with heavy six cycles often struggle with codependency, toxic dynamics, repeating relationship patterns, rescuing energy. So, for those people that always have to tend to what's on someone else's side of the street, right? Or step in and fix someone else's problem, right? That is the shadow energy of six. That also could look like feeling responsible for everyone's emotions and ignoring their intuition. Six in itself is the teacher of love, and it's not the romantic kind that you desire, but the hard love that you must learn for yourself. So, what prompted this episode for me a few nights ago? I had this epiphany, right? I was in a meditative state. And during this state, right, I was receiving like a lot of downloads. And one of my biggest issues is sometimes I don't like to actualize my thoughts, which is bad, right? By grounding them. But I'll force myself to do it at the end of the night via journaling, right? But anyways, this just so happened to be just a random moment where I was in a meditative state and I started thinking about a video that I had seen prior 2 in the day, right? And the video, I want to see if I can find it actually. The guy was talking about 6 and 9 energy and how 6, the number 6 is synonymous with Hebrew people, right? And so how, if you guys know, you know, I don't want to get too much into it in this episode, right? But with the Hebrew people and the Jewish people, what we're seeing now, right? um that is the sixth energy, so that he was basically talking about how we're watching in real time the unveiling or the unfolding and unraveling of the true Hebrew people, right? And so that is the transmutation from the six to the nine, and I will get into that a little bit later in this episode. But one of the things that really deeply resonated with me when I was listening to this was, for one, earlier this year, I actually just found out that my name is Hebrew, right? For God's promise. So I don't know. For me, it's like a bunch of synchronicities that really are starting to make a lot more sense now, right? And it was kind of like an aha moment. So when I think about six energy, right? I think about pretty much the entirety of my life, and not necessarily the actual energy of six, right? But the shadow. So the self-abandonment, the overgiving, the constantly showing up for, people in a way that maybe it's not reciprocated, right? Um, for example, I remember, you know, being in a place of really lack, right? That's the best way that I can explain it, right? I was really in a period of lack. And I don't know if I should tell this story, but I guess I'll go ahead and do it, right? Um, I had when I moved to this place that I am in now, I pretty much had everything, laid out. So I had my car, I had, a good stream of income. I had my apartment, I was able to contribute and go pick up my kids and drop them off and, all of this, that, and third. What ended up happening afterwards, because my car got repoed, really stupid, but I lost my job and in the process of trying to replace another one and do DoorDash, I fell behind on my payments. During that particular time, it was like literally a month before I was due to get my tax refund. So instead of communicating that with the bank, I kind of just panicked and ignored them. And then, one morning I woke up and my car was no longer there. Boom, fast forward, my ex-husband who had the van that we both contributed into, the van had been sitting at the house for, I don't know, maybe like 3 years. So I had inquired about, maybe you could possibly give the van to me, being that I had put, all new tires and, all of these things into the vehicle. And he was basically like, no, because it needs to be fixed. This, that, and third, no problem. Um, that just stayed on in his driveway, and then, I find out later on that he sold it to, one of his relatives for $800, and I'm like, "Well, why would you do that when the mother of your children doesn't have a vehicle?" And, I would've if you would ask me, I would've given you something for it, but, that's just kind of how, when I think back to all of the times that I was able to show up, right, when I had all of my stuff together, I would kind of be very, very quick, very abrupt to going and contributing and helping as much as I could, right? But then it also showed me that when I'm in the same situation, right? When I am in lack, or I need someone to show up for me the way that I was showing up for them, it just doesn't happen, right? And so it basically caused me to start paying closer attention to the way that I'm showing up for people, right? If I see that, I'm able to be present and, helpful when it is that you might need help, but then, the first sight of me needing help, you kind of like turn your back, then that's kind of like, I don't know. Now I want to get into nine energy and breaking down the number nine. So, 9 is the last number in numerology, and it's also synonymous with the final chapter. It's the conclusion, the spiritual evolution. For me, when I think about 9, I think about the completion of closing cycles, patterns, anything like that. Nine is the vibration of endings. It also represents karmic completion, spiritual purpose, emotional maturity, and also releasing what it is that is no longer aligned. It also it also represents forgiveness, wisdom, humanitarian leadership, divine callings, and where six attaches, nine lets go. Okay, I'm going to say that again. Where six attaches, that is where nine lets go. Where six sacrifices, nine ascends. Whereas six stays too long, nine says the contract is over. When nine enters your life or you are in that nine vibration, that frequency, everything that was built on wounded foundations begins to crumble. And it's not because you failed, but it is simply because your soul graduated, right? When I think about, that nine energy and the cycle, it really does call me to, a lot of painful endings that I've had in my life, right? And had it not been for the pain or the realization that you have to eventually let go in order to receive, right? I probably would have been combating myself over and over again. And I think I talked about this previously in one of my other episodes about how that decision, right? That decision, when you're consciously making the decision to change or pivot out of a cycle that you were once so chaotically entangled in, what it feels like actually is like an actual literal internal war. It's a battle, right? Where your body is fighting your mind and your mind is trying to take precedence over your body to help move you out of that pattern, right? And for me, it came with a lot of those painful endings, right? It was what it was that I ultimately knew versus what my ego wanted. So there's this thing when transformation happens, the journey from 6 to 9, that's what I like to call it, right? It's the soul's final exam. So if you listen to that part closely, it's powerful. It's the soul's final exam. And I know a lot of people, when they start listening to like spiritual stuff, they're like, oh, this is a bunch of woo woo. But when you actually start to tune into and actually embody that energy, that soul contract that you have, and you start moving through that, that is when it becomes more apparent, more evident that your soul literally goes through times of tests and peacefulness and calm and then chaos. It's just kind of all over the place, but it's a beautifully orchestrated mess, if that makes sense. So the six energy teaches you that lesson, right? Nine tests whether you've actually learned it. Six is the emotional trigger, and nine is the emotional mastery. Six is loving from wounds, and nine is loving from wisdom. And when I think about that particular combination, right? The loving from wounds is maybe that people pleaser state that I was once in, right? Where I felt like, yes, I am hurt, but because I'm hurt, I can do something different to make sure that, other people don't feel that way, right? But that also puts me back into a state of self abandonment, right? Those wounds. But when you start operating from nine energy and you're loving from wisdom is saying, okay, I can still love this person, right? I can still love this circumstance, this environment, right? And also be cautious and aware of what it is that I already know and choose not to stay stuck in those cycles, right? Six is what makes you cling and nine forces you to surrender. It's almost like six comes from a vibration of fear. And if you're not truly careful and mindful, you will mistake that for the actual assignment. You will mistake the trauma for the assignment. 6 shows you what hurts, and 9 shows you what it is that you need to heal. Most people fail this transition because they don't want to let go. They want to feel comfortable or even familiar with their circumstances, even when it's killing their spirit. So when you start to shift from 6 to 9 energy, life feels like people will start falling away. Friendships are going to start dissolving, right? Relationships will end. Your tolerance for certain things will decrease and your intuition increases. It'll also look like spiritual signs are everywhere. A few, what was it? It was last month. It was like at the beginning of last month. I was on the phone with my sister and we were having a conversation. I forgot what we were talking about. It might have been our podcast, No Labels, Just Vibes. And as we're talking, someone's Uber pulls up in front of my house and the license plate number was 8808. And I felt this very supercharged feeling inside because I was like, why is that popping up right now, right? And I don't believe in coincidences, not even a little bit, right? So as we're talking, I'm telling her like I just literally saw a license plate, like it's sitting right there. I took a picture and everything. And she's like, "Oh, we gotta look that up." So she starts looking it up and she was like, "Oh, this is literally like the best thing ever because it talks about cycles and abundance coming in and old cycles closing out." So I'm like, that definitely did track for that particular time and kind of what it was that we were working towards and doing in that process, right? You're also going to start feeling like you're being pushed forward. Again, for me, that was that 8808. When I saw that number, that's a powerful combination of sequence of numbers being put together, right? And to see it in that exact moment, that is literally the universe saying, um, okay, this is it. Like you're on the right path. So when you start feeling like that, right, your soul is literally saying, we are done learning that lesson. It is time to move forward. So I wouldn't even say it was like intuition. So I'm gonna story time, right? When it comes to all of these things, all of the things that you're going to start feeling when you are moving from 6 energy to 9 energy, recently closed out a cycle. And like for me, when I closed out cycles previously, or prior to, right, one of the things that I noticed was that I was like at constant war with, like I said before, what it was that I knew versus what my ego wanted. So I had to be able to learn to discern the difference between the two, right? Otherwise, I would keep making the same mistakes over and over again. And I remember, closing out one cycle where, intuitively and mentally, I knew that, I wasn't in the right place, not in the right spot. And, it most certainly was not the right time. And I think it took me so long to kind of close out that cycle because I was desperately clinging on to what I perceived as safety in that moment, right? Those chaotic, those chaotic times, right? Those chaotic patterns, the times of confusion and having to pretty much assess or question my worth, those all felt like safety to me, right? And I saw something, someone said, people can be addicted to their own pain, right? And I think in being honest, like that was definitely a time or a period that I experienced an addiction to those negative chemicals that my body was excreting, right? To the point where now like I'm trying to re-regulate myself. I'm trying to get to a point where I'm sleeping and retaining my dreams, not feeling so anxious. So it's something that is a constant battle, right? Once you decide to close out that cycle, to keep that cycle closed out and to keep yourself focused, that is that's a task. Like it's not always easy, right? So I want to talk about my birth chart and the number 9. shift or 6 and 9 shift. So we're going to mix numerology with astrology because your birth chart determines how you move from 6 to 9. So using my chart as an example, and you guys can apply it to your own. I was born March 9th, 1988 at 11:34 a.m. in Rochester, New York. So my sun sign, I'm a Pisces, which I associate as being a healer, a deep empath, and the intuitive, also an old soul. And I also started telling people that I am a seer because when I sleep, I can literally see things that have yet to happen. Yes, we'll save that for another episode. But my the moon when I was born was a waxing crescent. So the soul that came here to break generational cycles rewrites patterns and births a completely new story in this lifetime. So if you are a waxing crescent soul, I want you to listen closely. You came into this world carrying ancestral responsibility, but your destiny is to create new cycles and not to maintain the old ones. Basically, in a nutshell, what this means is that you are spiritually coded for evolution. You won't stay where your soul does not grow. Hold on, guys. You're spiritually coded for evolution. So you will not stay where your soul doesn't grow. And I want to give you guys an example. Have you ever encountered maybe like a relationship where you felt like, on the chemistry level, it was just super off the chains, right? But maybe you guys kept bumping heads and it's like you could never get on the same page. And that is because your soul is not evolving in that space, right? So what that looks like is that you're going to keep being pushed out of old entities until you finally step into alignment. There is a quote, right, that I always see on Facebook, and it's like, the universe will use that person to hurt you until you finally choose to let them go, right? Or, even one that talks about how people will try to access the old version of you, not realizing that you don't even live there anymore. These are both very powerful metaphors for this particular episode in itself, right? So until you find yourself getting into alignment with what it is that you're supposed to be doing, you're going to continue to experience those same karmic patterns and cycles. So, Pisces sun, if you have a Pisces sun, that makes you deeply intuitive, spiritually guided. So, I don't know if you've ever had like a hunch or an inkling about something, right? And you've been on point. Like even I'm gonna give you guys like a micro example. I remember back in 2018 when I was doing my EMT certification and I went to take my practical my test. And while I'm taking my test, or not while I'm taking my test, while I'm driving to my test, I'm like super anxious. I'm nervous because I'm like, oh my God, like I really hope I pass this thing. Da da da. You know how you get like pre-test jitters or whatever. So I'm pulling up to the parking lot so I can go inside of the school. And I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna find a parking spot, blah blah blah. It's gonna be right here. It's gonna be pushed inside of like it's going to be in the front and there's going to be like 3 cars on this side, and like I actually made that shit happen like the first couple of times like I did it. So that's what I mean by spiritually guided. I feel like I'm rambling. It also makes you emotionally sensitive and very connected to dreams. Now I talk about a lot heavy on here, and I think I'm actually going to do a season just for unpacking dreams because I love actually breaking down the metaphysics of my dreams, right? To the point where I'll write a lot of them down. But I remember there was a time where I had this dream, and I actually was just thinking about it a few days ago, right? Where I was in this glass house, like on vacation. I found out that it was actually a booby trap, right? It was a trap for everybody that was in it. And so, I had got my daughter and I got out and I'm thinking like it's a maze and I'm thinking like it's a trick. I won't be able to get out, only to realize that getting out was much easier than what I saw it to be, right? The door was clearly right there. And so when I walked out, I saw people in a street. So I went out into the street and ended up in a mall, right? So for me, when I think about that and I unpack it, it's basically we systematically create these prisons of our own doings in our minds, right? And we pretty much lock ourselves down in that prison, right? Not realizing that it's really quite simple to get out, but in the moment, the way that things perceive externally or the way that we perceive things externally, it feels like we'll never get out of that place, right? And so all of the problems that we have in our mind, we just keep stacking and stacking and stacking. So ultimately, we're creating this overly cluttered place, right? Where we can't even thrive because we are literally locking our own selves down. I know that that dream meant that because I had another one just like that, probably like sometime last year. But this time I was in a mall, strangely enough, right? And it was like a zombie apocalypse and it was so cluttered. So I'm running upstairs, I'm running downstairs, I'm trying to go left, I'm trying to go right. And then finally I look and there's a door that leads out to the street. And I get outside and it's calm. So all of that inner chaos, that inner turmoil that we have up here and we just sit with it, right? It festers and then it starts to unfold in real time, right? Um Pisces sun also looks like being empathetic, but also drained. And for me, when I think about that, I think about the one thing that I see on social media where people talk about having being empathetic. What is it called? It's exhaustion due to being so empathetic, right? And so what this looks like is you might be like tired of people's problems, right? Because you're constantly trying to show up to solve other people's things, right? Or make maybe in your circle, you're the one that keeps like trying to resolve issues and make everybody stronger. You're trying to hold everything together, right? That becomes draining because you're not dealing with your own stuff, right? Deal with other people's stuff, deal with yours a little bit. So now by the time it's time for you to deal with you and what you have to do for yourself, you're tired. You don't even have the energy to do it, right? So that is a pro and a con of being a Pisces sun. It also looks like being a natural healer, right? A soul with a with karmic depth, right? So this is why for me, 6 cycles feel so heavy because Pisces absorbs. It's also a mutable sign. So basically that means that we are able to kind of not conform, but we can kind of mesh into any sort of environment, right? Like wherever you put a Pisces, it'll either thrive or fail, right? Based on its environment. So now when I talk about that, the rising sun, I want to talk about the north node, right? Because your north node is actually where your purpose comes into play. That's where the 9 energy shift pulls you into alignment. Now, funny story. If you guys have been here on my channel for a while, you know that I started Truth, Trust, and Trajectory probably this time last year, along with getting my coaching credentials and, writing my book, right? And so that is something that I've been primarily focused on for the whole year, right? Making sure that I'm building up my channel, trying to get clients for my coaching business and all of that. Sorry guys, I'm like super like antsy. I'm all over the place. But the other day when I was telling you guys about the 6-9 energy, right? I had put it into chat. And so I specifically prompted it. I asked, first of all, what does transmuting 6 energy to 9 energy, what does that look like? And then after you've successfully done that, right, can you tell me how this interconnects directly to my chart? I put in all of my information, and I almost started crying. I wasn't even in a place where I could like actively cry because I would cry around people that I don't know. I was like, oh my God, like literally everything that I have been doing in this last past year has been pretty much pushing me into alignment with what it is that I'm supposed to be doing, not realizing that, right? And so for me, it's like that shows the power of astrology, right? And let me think of the best way to say this, right? We often think that we have free will, which we do, right? We do to an extent, but it's almost like one of those illusionary things, right? It's like if your higher self programmed you before your soul came down here and it programmed you to carry out a certain goal or objective, right? This is what you're, and this is what I need you to be doing down here, right? But also, your higher self has to take into account human error because it knows that, you're going to get down here and you're going to start humaning. That's just what we do down here sometimes. So it'll basically tell you, like, hey, like, you're definitely going to go through this. You're definitely going to go through this. This is, you probably have like a little bit of say so when it comes to this, but ultimately this is what we're pushing you towards, right? So your life could look like this or could look like that. So when I actually started thinking about it and everything that I have been doing up until this point for the last year, it just made me like really think about like how much we're not actually in control, but we are. Because how is it that I'm actually learning my purpose through Chat GPT whilst I'm actively in it and not even realizing that I'm in it, right? And then also the dreams and everything like that too. So six energy, how it shows up in relationships. So this part I want to talk about relationships. Yes. Because this is where six energy shows its whole entire S. Six energy, it's gonna make you care too much. It's gonna make you give too deeply. It's going to make you ignore red flags, stay out of loyalty, and want to fix people. It's also going to attract wounded souls, and you will ultimately end up losing yourself in love and also taking responsibility for someone else's healing. But here is the truth. Every relationship rooted in six energy will eventually collapse if you resist growth. Because nine energy comes in clear, right? And it'll clear out the debris. Nine energy says, does this connection elevate your soul or does it drain it? When you start transitioning to nine energy, what you're going to notice is people are going to start to become distant. You'll have sudden arguments, emotional disconnects, feeling like you're done, spiritually detached. You'll have clarity that you didn't have before and peace when you walk away. This isn't about heartbreak. This is literally about alignment, right? So, story, when I closed out a cycle recently, and I talk about it, every bad choice in relationship that I have, you guys can find up here on my podcast, right? But in closing a cycle, I remember, not really feeling so spiritually connected, right? To where I felt like I had to overthink what it was that my mind was already aware of. And so this is what it could look like right before, as the dominoes are collapsing, right before the last one hits, right? It's kind of like a detachment, a disassociation, if you will, right? So spiritual awakening signs of the shift. When you're moving from six to nine energy, your spirit goes through this weird awakening. So here are some signs. You'll see the number 6, 9, 69, 96. You'll see that everywhere. You'll feel spiritually guided. You'll crave solitude and you cannot tolerate low vibration, not for an extended period of time. Your intuition will get louder and you'll have vivid dreams. Emotional triggers will start to surface and you'll feel called towards your purpose. Old friendships will start to feel misaligned and you'll feel like you are shedding a past identity. This awakening isn't punishment, it's preparation. Now, for me, some of what that process looks like is, I'll have days of like overly emotional, sad, depressed, all of that, right? Just feeling very confused And then, also there are flashlight moments of feeling very certain and clear on what it is that I'm, pursuing. So, in my purpose, just a couple of days ago, right? I'm like, man, I need to really get active because I feel like I have all of these, skills and abilities that I'm literally just sleeping on. And for me, like, that's a really bad feeling because it's like when you have so many skills and abilities and you're not like directing it your energy at those to kind of like give life to them, it almost feels like you're just existing, you're not even living. So I want to talk about how to consciously step into nine energy. So I want to make this very practical. Here's how you step fully into nine energy. You're going to release what your soul has already outgrown. Stop forcing cycles that spirit has already ended. You want to accept endings without guilt. And that's not always the easy thing, but it is possible. Not every chapter is meant to last forever. Detachment from emotional patterns. Stop trying to save people who don't save themselves. Trusting your intuition is key over your attachments. Your soul knows before your mind does, right? You're going to focus on your higher calling because mostly all of us have one. Your gifts are not by accident. I just talked about, having all of these skills and abilities and how you can literally just squander all those away throughout your life by not focusing on those, right? Your gifts are not an accident. Honor your boundaries. Nine energy requires backbone. That is, it's not for the weak, it's not for the timid, it's not for the, oh, I don't want them to be mad at me. Like sometimes you have to be okay with being the villain in someone else's story, right? Especially if you know that you have shown up in every possible way that you could have. Sometimes that's all you can do. It talks about walking away when your spirit gets quiet. Silence is always the direction. When you honor the release, you unlock evolution. I don't want you guys to forget that, right? So I really hope that this episode resonated with you guys. If it did, I want you to leave me a review down in the comments. Also, don't forget to subscribe, like, and hit the notification bell so you never miss another episode. Also, make sure you guys check out my website, shakimb.com. Let me put it up there so you guys can see. All right, so check out my website, shakimb.com, where I have interactive shadow work journals that helps you get down to the nitty gritty of what it is that you're holding yourself back from in this life, right? And how to ultimately heal that trauma. I also have complimentary one-on-one half-hour coaching discovery sessions just to see if we're a good fit for each other, right? And I just want you guys to hear this particular message very clearly. You're not losing people and you are not losing patterns. You are not walking away from love. You are walking away from the version of yourself that tolerated any and everything less than what it is that you deserve. You are not being punished. You are being positioned. The shift from 6 to 9 is not the end of you. It is the beginning of your purpose. And in the next episode, I'm going to break down the most important part of your entire spiritual blueprint, which is going to be your North Node, your divine assignment, and your soul mission. The destiny that you cannot escape. Good Lord. Need coffee. If this episode resonated with you guys, please make sure you like, subscribe, and share and comment where you are in your 6-9 journey. And stay tuned for the bonus episode. Make sure you guys hit that notification bell so you don't miss it. Your North Node purpose and soul contract behind your entire life story. Also, make sure you guys check out my website, shakimb.com. And until next time, okay, bye.